Hello, and welcome to Life Diaries, a space where the pages of life open up, one story at a time. These are tales written by experience, spoken from the heart. Take a moment for yourself, and let's begin. One July evening, a Monday, Olivia Shishkina suddenly felt her life had stopped. It happened completely unexpectedly. Grumbling softly to herself, she was sorting through the bag of her husband, who had returned the day before from a sanatorium where he had been visiting his mother. 30 years old and still like a little child. I have to clean up after him. Why is everything on me? Barbara must have slipped in some of her dirty clothes so she could travel light. Arthur, engrossed in the spectacle on the television screen, heard neither his wife's grumbling nor her surprised exclamation. "Oh!" Olivia blurted out, adding to herself, "Well, there's your O. There you go, you trusting fool. A perfect family life? Here you are, sign on the dotted line." Among her mother-in-law's things, she found some underwear. This intimate garment, the stout Barbara could perhaps pull up to her elbow, but certainly not where it was supposed to go. After this discovery, Olivia felt as if she had been pierced. It was as if all the scattered pieces of the puzzle instantly fell into place. The picture of their family life, which until recently had seemed flawless, was revealed in its true light. Arthur was cheating on her. Using flimsy excuses, he was basely betraying their relationship. He had spat on her feelings, on 7 years of marriage that had seemed so happy. They had overcome difficulties together, sincerely rejoiced in each other's successes without a hint of envy, not counting who contributed more to their joint budget. Even the absence of children, which worried their mothers, they saw as something temporary. They felt there was no need to rush. Olivia was only 18 when she got married, and only recently had thoughts of starting a family begun to surface. Arthur, however, didn't bring up the subject, and she herself was somehow too shy not just to say it directly, but even to hint. But now the question of expanding their family had receded into the background. The problem was far more acute. Olivia was seized by a desire to stage a grand scandal for her husband, one that would make the devils sick. To burst into the room just like that and slap Arthur across the face with that very item. The first furious impulse quickly faded when the woman realized she was still clutching the rival's underwear in her hand. It became unbearably disgusting. Olivia crumpled the evidence of her husband's betrayal and hurled it back into the bag with force. Her old basketball hobby hadn't been in vain. A moment later, the incriminating item was back where she had so unexpectedly pulled it from. Suddenly, Olivia found it hard to breathe. Fortunately, the washing machine was in the kitchen, and she, overcoming the pain where the wound of her husband's infidelity now gaped, took a couple of steps and sank onto the small sofa. But what if Arthur wasn't to blame for any of this? Maybe her mother-in-law accidentally picked up the underwear of her roommate along with her own things. Anything can happen. Maybe the room is cramped or the wardrobe is shared. Although her relationship with her mother-in-law had been improving lately, Olivia didn't want to call Barbara and find out if such a mix-up could have occurred. For some reason, she felt ashamed. Surprisingly, she felt as if she herself were entirely to blame. Loud sounds from an adventure film drifted from the room, making it difficult to concentrate and calmly consider how to behave with her husband now and how to punish him if he had indeed decided to have fun on the side. Olivia meticulously went over all the moments in her memory that had been scratching at her soul more and more often lately. The main thing was his regular absences. For about a month, Arthur had spent almost all his free time without her, citing some strange reasons for his absence. No, individually they seemed quite valid, reasonable, but there were just too many of them accumulated. On Tuesday and Thursday, her husband would say something like, "Honey, I'll run out to the dasha in the morning, fill the tank with water, water the beds while there's water. I'll stay a bit late at work. The boss was accommodating, allowed this schedule before the weekend. Arthur said he had promised to help a friend, or that they were having a team-building event at work. Yes, all these oddities had been going on for about a month. And in the last 2 weeks, Arthur's sense of filial duty had suddenly sharpened. While Barbara was recovering at the countryside sanatorium, he went to her apartment every other day to water the flowers. Because, you see, it was hot outside, the apartment resembled a sauna at noon, and his mother's favorite plants could suffer. Even the owner herself didn't care for those violets so tenderly. Now Olivia clearly saw the strangeness of her husband's behavior. Usually, caring for the flowers fell on her shoulders, but not this year. Arthur, hugging her affectionately, said she was already very tired, and these chores were no burden to him at all. And Olivia had suggested moving her mother-in-law's beloved flowers to the bathroom, where it was always cooler, and turning on grow lights there so they'd have enough light. But her husband objected to this quite reasonable suggestion. He seemed to argue reasonably. Water and electricity unsupervised wasn't the best option. But her heart was still uneasy. Olivia was very worried and didn't know what to do. It would be good, of course, to talk to someone and get advice from an outsider. But whom could she turn to? The most obvious, but also the most unfortunate option, was to call her mother. Upon learning of her daughter's suspicions about Arthur's fidelity, she would get very upset, start taking valerian drops, and her blood pressure would rise. No, she absolutely couldn't worry her mother. Olivia didn't have any close friends with whom she could discuss such a delicate topic. Of course, she had many acquaintances, friendly and pleasant women, but she wouldn't dare to talk about family problems with any of them. It would evoke unnecessary pity, and there would be no guarantee against a leak of personal information. Her reputation as a happy, prosperous woman would go downhill. And the general director had a peculiar quirk. Only people who, in his opinion, had everything going well could hold key positions, even in departments. Harmony at home, in his opinion, had a beneficial effect on work success. After a divorce or less significant troubles, such as a revealed infidelity and conflicts, employees were transferred to other positions. Formalities, of course, were observed. The person didn't lose salary, and no bad entries appeared in their work record book. But Olivia absolutely didn't want such changes, so there was nowhere to expect hints on how to live on. She would have to manage on her own. Gray spots flickered before Olivia's eyes, which always heralded a migraine. The woman winced. That was all she needed. If this ailment flared up, she would be incapacitated for a couple of days. And tomorrow there was a meeting with the commercial director. How inconvenient everything was. And it was all because of this discovery, damn it. More precisely, Arthur and his possible infidelity. Speak of the devil. The culprit of Olivia's headache appeared in the kitchen. He acted as if nothing had happened. He turned on the kettle, made a couple of sandwiches, looked at his bag, and addressed his wife. Liv, forget about the chores. I'll go to Mom's tomorrow. I'll throw everything in her washing machine there so I don't have to carry it back and forth. And anyway, let's go watch a movie. A really good one. I didn't even expect it. Arthur began to briefly retell the plot to his wife, but Olivia interrupted him because she didn't have the strength to listen to empty chatter after discovering the incriminating evidence. No, thank you. I think I'd better lie down here. I'm a bit tired. It's been a tough Monday. Okay, then I'll turn the sound down. And you don't turn on the washing machine either? How can you rest with its racket? Shall I turn off the light? Olivia nodded, feeling a pang of pain. She didn't feel like talking to her husband at all. Arthur put the prepared food on a tray, picked up the bag, and left the kitchen, closing the door behind him. In the darkness, the headache receded a little, and the woman didn't even notice how she fell asleep. In the morning, Olivia opened her eyes, mentally rejoicing that apparently the migraine had decided to spare her and not arrange a sky in diamonds. The night's rest had been very beneficial. Even the certainty of her husband's infidelity was no longer as strong as it had been the day before. Instead, the version that a stranger's underwear had gotten mixed up among her mother-in-law's things seemed, on the contrary, the most realistic. Olivia stretched on the sofa, rejoicing once again that she had insisted on buying it, and began to get ready for work, while simultaneously preparing breakfast. Arthur, as a rule, woke up later, and this morning was no exception. By the time her husband appeared in the kitchen, Olivia had finished breakfast, left him food, and was already on the starting block. "Livy, don't expect me home early tonight. I'll stop by Mom's apartment right after work, do the laundry, and check on the flowers. She won't forgive me if anything happens to her green pets." Jealousy and resentment flared up again. The woman almost recoiled when Arthur, as always, came over to kiss her. But she managed to endure the usual morning ceremony. Olivia hurried to work because she needed to get routine tasks done before the meeting. However, it was difficult to concentrate, her thoughts involuntarily returning to yesterday's discovery. At the meeting, the commercial director even made a remark. "Olivia, are you not interested in the topic of our meeting at all?" "Why, Mr. Harrison, I'm listening to you very attentively." "Strange. You have such a faraway look, as if you're somewhere far from here." Knowing perfectly well what and how the commercial director spoke, Olivia recounted several main points. Quite satisfied with the result, Mr. Harrison interrupted her and continued his speech. While the man was rambling on at length, beating around the bush, Olivia decided to follow her husband. Fortunately, she worked longer, and setting up an ambush near her mother-in-law's house was not difficult. The courtyard there was a dead end, and only one road led to it, at the turn of which there was a cafe with panoramic windows. If she took a good table, the view would be magnificent. And as for Arthur possibly dropping in there for pastries, she didn't need to worry. You couldn't drag him into a cafe like that even with a lasso. After making her decision, the woman calmed down a little, and for the rest of the workday was practically not distracted by thoughts of her husband's infidelity. Only towards evening did she start to tremble slightly. After all, it was an unusual undertaking, not something you do every day. Or to be precise, it would be her debut in the field of secret surveillance. At the cafe, Olivia ordered berry juice and a pastry that the saleswoman actively praised. Only then did the woman, suspecting her husband of infidelity, realize that, engrossed in her worries, she had forgotten to eat lunch. The strawberry filling in the pastry turned out to be unusually tasty, and the wait became less burdensome. Noticing her husband's car drive past the cafe, Olivia continued her task. Following her husband was not difficult. He parked the car on the paved area, took a sports bag from the back seat, and, without looking around, entered his mother-in-law's building. A few minutes later, the light in the kitchen windows of her apartment came on. Olivia froze in anticipation. If Arthur had a date, then the mistress should appear soon. On a fine summer evening, there were many people outside, as walking through the quiet courtyard was a shortcut. Her heart stopped every time attractive women walked past the entrance. However, everyone just walked by. Only a couple of guys with bags entered the building. Under the cover of passers-by and bushes, Olivia waited. Then the light went out, and the woman saw her husband come out of the entrance alone with a clearly empty bag. It seemed he had waited for the washing machine to finish. Apparently, no one had come to him, and Olivia couldn't believe that the mistress rival lived in the same building of a modest Khrushchev-era apartment block. It was too unlikely a scenario, unless it was for some melodramatic TV series. Despite the fact that her debut in surveillance did not bring the expected result, Olivia decided to closely observe her husband for a few more days. It wasn't such a difficult task. At least I'll bring clarity to this whole situation, the woman thought. It's not a big deal that I don't have experience and Arthur might notice me. I'll explain somehow. The morning surveillance on Wednesday was thwarted. Although, of course, the fact that her husband woke up at the crack of dawn to go to the dacha raised suspicion. However, Olivia simply couldn't afford to take time off work. In the evening, Arthur went straight home after work. This was slightly reassuring. Thursday also brought Olivia no incriminating evidence against her husband. Moreover, he had only visited his mother's apartment once during these days, as if he sensed he was under his wife's close scrutiny. However, Olivia understood that it was too early to relax. Who knows what her husband's schedule of meetings with his mistress is, if he has one? Mentally scolding herself, the suspicious woman didn't even check her husband's phone right away. But there were so many numbers in the call history, including repeated ones, that none of them immediately stood out. Reading messages and messengers also yielded nothing. Olivia knew that online chats existed where correspondence disappeared immediately after leaving. However, the browser history on his smartphone showed no record of visiting such sites. Realizing that she was just an ordinary person, not a trained specialist, Olivia decided to go all in and try to disrupt her husband's supposed meeting with his mistress. On Friday evening, she suggested, "Arthur, we've been stuck at home for too long. Maybe we should go on an impromptu excursion, like a weekend trip?" Arthur smiled guiltily and spread his hands. "No, Liv, I'm sorry. I'm going to Mom's on Saturday, you understand? I'll come back tired. I won't be up for walks. Sunday is also impossible. My colleagues and I agreed to go to a football match. They've built such a stadium, like a spaceship from a sci-fi movie. We need to see what our taxes are going towards, among other things." Olivia felt in her gut that her husband was lying to her. A lump in her throat made it hard to speak. So, her suspicions were correct. Her husband's meeting with his mistress was scheduled for the weekend. The woman decided to go all the way. "Listen, that's just wonderful. I'll go with you to Barbara's. It feels a bit awkward. She's due back from the sanatorium in a week, if I'm not mistaken, and I haven't visited her once. After the sanatorium, we can drive around the area, and that will be our spontaneous getaway." Arthur tried to dissuade his wife. "Liv, you weren't feeling very well at the beginning of the week. I think you need to rest." "Liv, stop. Arthur, it's simply indecent not to visit your mother-in-law even once. Besides, I just need a change of scenery." Olivia hoped she could catch a glimpse of her mother-in-law's roommate. She was very persistent and eventually got her way to visit his mother. Barbara was happy to see both her son and daughter-in-law. They spent a wonderful time walking along the well-maintained paths laid out among majestic trees. Even the summer heat in the dappled shade seemed less exhausting. Nimble red squirrels, tamed by visitors and staff, amusingly scampered along branches and came down to people for treats. Olivia, preparing for the walk, had brought seeds and nuts. She offered her supplies to Arthur and Barbara. "Try feeding these little animals yourselves. They're so funny. They use their paws just like hands." The squirrels fearlessly descended to the outstretched palms with treats, delicately took the food, and ate neatly, looking up with their intelligent eyes. By one of the paths, Barbara introduced a woman she met to her daughter-in-law. "This is Annie, my roommate." The lady of almost immense proportions smiled privetlivo. Olivia almost burst into tears. The hope that the item of women's clothing found in her husband's bag belonged to her mother-in-law's roommate was shattered into pieces. This item clearly could not belong to this woman. Trying not to show her disappointment and anger, Olivia continued the walk. But there was no trace of her former serenity left. After saying goodbye to Barbara, the couple left the sanatorium grounds, and Arthur, completely oblivious to his wife's changed mood, suggested, "Well, shall we drive around the area, as we planned?" "Oh, Arthur, I think I've had enough walking. Let's just go home. I'm kind of worn out too." The irritated Olivia couldn't help but retort sarcastically, "Yes, well, you're an old man, and it seems my body is decrepit too." Arthur ignored his wife's disgruntled tone. He wasn't even bothered by the fact that Olivia didn't talk to him on the way home, attributing everything to her fatigue. Olivia defined her surveillance activities as a decisive step. Indeed, if he had a mistress, and he was supposedly going to a football match, which he had never been a fan of, it clearly meant he was going on a date. In the morning, Arthur got up very early, even before his wife, and she was woken by the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. When she entered the kitchen, the man had almost finished breakfast. "Okay, honey, I'm off," Olivia remarked sarcastically. "Isn't it a bit early? As I recall, the football match starts in the evening." The man tried to speak convincingly and calmly. "Well, we'll meet up first, chat, and then head to the stadium." The woman didn't make any more sarcastic remarks so as not to arouse her husband's suspicion, and asked, "Are you walking or driving?" "Driving. I'm not planning to drink and I don't want to deal with taxis or public transport. It's calmer for me. I'm my own boss." "Okay, I understand. Then I'll get to the beauty salon myself. It's fine. Have a good rest." Olivia tried to speak as calmly as possible. It seemed to her that her husband didn't even suspect that she didn't trust him and was planning to follow him. The parking lot was a 5-minute walk from the house, and as soon as Arthur closed the door behind him, Olivia called a taxi and quickly got dressed. The driver wasn't surprised by the passenger's request. It was clear this wasn't his first time participating in surveillance. The man confidently drove the car, staying slightly behind the pursued vehicle. "I had a case with my first wife. She was always running off somewhere, saying she was going to the store. One excuse after another. I suspected it right away. Of course I followed her. It's fun being a detective." The driver, mimicking Arthur's maneuver, turned into the parking lot near the supermarket and, choosing the most advantageous spot for observation, turned off the engine and continued his story. "So, my wife tells me she's going to the store again, and I think she's going to the children's boarding school for the mentally disabled. Her child lived there. She put him there because it was difficult for her, and only someone who has faced such a misfortune themselves can judge her for that action. Well, back then I was like, in a white coat, playing the holy martyr. I almost went crazy. How could this be? They kept something like this a secret from me." Both Lucy and her mother were silent. "I caught my wife at the gate of that poorhouse and made a scene. She didn't even try to justify herself, just said she knew we'd get divorced anyway. And whether it was because of the truth or a lie, what difference does it make?" The driver, without asking the passenger's permission, lit a cigarette and continued his confession, ignoring the growing column of ash. "I don't know what I would have done if she had told me the truth right away, when we were dating. Maybe I wouldn't have married her. Or maybe, on the contrary, I would have asked her to introduce me to the child. Now I think I could have understood everything if only Lucy had been honest with me. But no, it was easier for her to deceive me. What would you have done in my place? Could you have forgiven her?" Olivia didn't know how to answer the taxi driver correctly, but her husband, appearing in the doorway of the store with 2 huge bags in his hands, saved her from having to voice her opinion, especially since it wouldn't have been absolution for the man anyway. Arthur, not expecting to be followed, didn't look around, quickly walked to the car, put his load in the trunk, and drove on. The taxi driver, keeping a short distance, followed. He didn't say anything else, reliving the events of the past once again. The car turned off the main highway onto a road perfectly familiar to Olivia. Now, another 12 kilometers from the turn, and the Energizer Garden Association would appear. Barbara had been allocated her legal 600 square meters there back in Soviet times. Olivia used to go there even before she was engaged, when she had just started dating Arthur. Barbara didn't burden her with much work back then, and even now, she prefers to tend to the greenhouse and other plantings. She hadn't grown potatoes on her plot for a long time, using the freed-up space for berry bushes. She had honeysuckle, strawberries, currants, raspberries, and gooseberries there. Where would a devotee of Chekhov's talent be without them? Turning on the indicators, the family car turned towards the dacha area. Continuing the surveillance by taxi was too noticeable. Olivia asked the taxi driver to stop and, paying him, hurried towards her mother-in-law's plot. Good luck, the driver wished. Remember, everything always happens for the best. Olivia hurried to her mother-in-law's plot and saw Arthur driving the car through the gate. She quickly hid behind a sprawling lilac bush near an abandoned dacha diagonally across. From there, she could see what was happening. Fortunately, her mother-in-law hadn't yet replaced the low picket fence on the street side with metal sheets, and everything was almost in plain sight. Olivia almost cried out in anger when a woman in a crop top and shorts flitted out onto the porch of the dacha house. The stranger's physique indicated that she could well be the owner of the ill-fated item found in Arthur's bag. Smiling, the mistress took one of the bags from Arthur. It was obvious that they knew each other, but the phrases they exchanged were indistinguishable. The deceived woman left her hiding place and headed towards the dacha to stage a loud scene for her traitor husband and his paramour, for the amusement of the neighbors. But she froze in place. Olivia's father appeared on the porch. It was then, many years ago, that he had basely announced to her mother that he had met and fallen in love with someone else. He said that their daughter was already grown up, and nothing else held them together, so he was leaving home, taking the family savings as compensation for half of the apartment bought during the marriage. Olivia had tried to influence her father then, begged him not to act rashly, pleaded with him to consider what a strong blow he was dealing to his wife, with whom he had lived for so many years. She threatened to stop all communication with him if he destroyed their family. It was useless. Mr. Miller abandoned his wife and tried to continue communicating with his daughter, congratulating her on holidays. But Olivia blocked his number. Then other numbers he called from met the same fate. Then her father stopped trying to contact her. Meeting her father's colleague, she learned that Mr. Miller had quit his job and moved somewhere out of town. Veronica would probably have gone crazy if not for the support of her daughter, who practically moved in with her for several months and made sure she didn't do anything to herself. It's not easy to forget happy years of marriage erased by infidelity. Her mother cried on her daughter's shoulder. Can you imagine? He said he met the love of his life. And who was I to him then? Just a passerby? An incubator for his only daughter? Upon hearing this unexpected news and seeing her mother in such a state for the first time, Olivia was in shock. She had always considered her parents' marriage unshakable, indestructible, like a rock. However, it turned out that all the years of family life could be very easily erased by one decision. A weight lifted from Olivia's heart because of the tenderness with which her father hugged the woman she didn't know, how he kissed her on the shoulder, and how readily and obligingly he took the bag from her. It was obvious that this was the rival, or, in his own words, the love of his life. Arthur looked at this outrage completely calmly, and soon the trio headed into the house. They didn't close the door, and Olivia followed them inside and greeted them with a voice ringing with indignation. "Hello, private company." The woman saw astonished faces. Arthur was the first to react. "Liv, how did you get here?" "Oh, I was just sitting at home, bored. I thought, why don't I go to the football match with my husband too? But here it's more like a tango for three, not a match from behind the bushes." "Liv, daughter. Hello." Mr. Miller remembered himself. "I'm very happy to see you. Please meet her. This is Sophia, Sophie. And this is my daughter, Livy, my pride. This is the one I've told you so much about." Olivia managed to see that the woman in the top and shorts was roughly her age, and she didn't stand on ceremony. "So this is her, the love of your life? The golden hand, foot, or whatever part of her body enchanted you? I can't say it's a pleasure to meet you, because I'm disgusted to see her in you, Arthur. And you've really disappointed me. I would never have thought you'd be entertaining your father-in-law and his girl with honors at your mother's dacha. Don't you dare talk about Sophie like that, Olivia's father exclaimed indignantly. Oh, as if she's a delicate violet. By the way, Sophie, didn't you happen to lose your little pants? My Arthur apparently accidentally picked them up along with some dirty towels. Is it inconvenient to wash here? Or is Sophie afraid of overworking her golden hands? Mr. Miller demanded. Olivia, stop. Enough with the malicious talk. Your husband is helping us at my request, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's a wonderful and responsive person. He's acting mercifully, and you're showing callousness and malice towards an innocent person. Well, I'd be too shy to call your Sophie innocent, to take a husband away from a strong and prosperous family, to force him to quit a normal job with a stable income, to force him to live not in a comfortable apartment, but in a dacha house with a bio-toilet and a shower from a tank. Dad is already old, not in his prime anymore. Yes, wonderful. Nothing to say. So, Sophie is simply a champion at worsening conditions? Maybe she should even be given a medal for her contribution to a happy approach to the grave. Mr. Miller's mistress was uncomfortable, but she remained silent. Olivia's father also didn't interfere in his daughter's angry dialogue, as she shifted the vector of her anger to her husband. It became clear that his dacha had become a haven for the lovers. Arthur lowered his eyes, and Olivia didn't need any more verbal response. It became clear to her that her husband hadn't cheated on her with another woman, but he hadn't acted much better. With Barbara's permission, either out of a sense of male solidarity or some other considerations, he was aiding his father-in-law and his paramour. You sly ones, Olivia gasped. How long have you been hiding this dacha retreat for lovers from me? A month? More? Daughter, calm down and let's talk, Mr. Miller suggested. It's not so clear-cut. Yes, I bought all sorts of goodies, Arthur announced. Indeed, let's discuss everything at the table. Olivia didn't miss the chance to speak once more about the hated destroyer of her parents' family. I won't sit at the same table with this Sophie with the golden foot. The young rival, shrugging, announced, Pete, I'm going to take care of the plantings and pick some berries. Call me if you need help. Arthur gently touched his wife's hand and pleaded, Don't be angry, Livy. I couldn't have done otherwise. After all, Mr. Miller is not a stranger. And anyway, he's done a lot of good things for us. Olivia pulled her hand away and, without hesitation, began to scold. Yes, he's done a lot of good. I barely saved Mom after his betrayal. I was afraid she'd do something bad, leave me an orphan. And it's all because of this Sophie. Turns out, he found himself a new paramour. Mr. Miller, taking food out of the bags his son-in-law had brought, set the table and remained silent. The man knew perfectly well that his daughter had a quick temper, but she was also quick to forgive. He just needed to let her vent. Sighing, Olivia sank into her favorite armchair in her mother-in-law's dacha house and addressed her father. Well, tell me, newlywed, how did you end up living in the countryside? Before, it was almost impossible to lure you to the dacha even for a visit. And now, I understand, you've been here for a month. And for some reason, the shower is primitive and all that. Mr. Miller smiled slightly. You're still my smart girl. You figured it out right away. Sophie and I actually have to hide. We got into a very ugly, terrible situation. Now we have to hide from creditors. Olivia was extremely surprised. How? You were always a fierce opponent of loans? Her father shrugged. Well, even old women make mistakes. That's how it happened. When I left your mother, Sophie and I moved to her town. We rented apartments there. I did odd jobs, saved money to buy a house within the city limits, and start my own business. I had little money left. It somehow disappeared unnoticed. Sophie suggested borrowing from her acquaintances. Then everything happened like in a bad crime movie. We were robbed on the way to the deal. They cut off the car Sophie was driving under a power of attorney from her friend. The fender was slightly dented, but at least they didn't injure us. Ah, Livy, if you had seen how Sophie defended me, you would never, ever call her bad names. She threw herself at the bandits like a tigress. She threatened and even shouted that if they touched me with even a finger, they wouldn't get anything, ever. It was so brave, so sincere, but so reckless. I was truly afraid for Sophie then, and I think I loved her even more. I understand that because of your mother it might be unpleasant for you to hear this, but I don't want to lie to you. In short, they mentally pressured us and stated a debt amount that was completely out of line. So we had to, as they say, flee from the sleepy town. There weren't many options where we could hide. We just need to stay put until Sophie's friend, who has connections in high places, returns from a trip to India. She went there for enlightenment. One of the main conditions the guru set for her was a complete break from ordinary reality, an absolute refusal of all forms of connection with the past. So I had to turn to Arthur as my closest person. I felt very awkward. If it weren't for him, who knows if I would be alive now. I'm very glad that my son-in-law agreed to solve our problem with housing and providing us with everything we need. Thank you very much to Barbara, too. Even a huge thank you. She understood our situation and allowed us to stay here. No one will think of looking for us here, so we don't have to be tense. I understand that Sophie and I are essentially a heavy burden on your family budget, but I promise, as soon as our situation improves. Mr. Miller spread his hands, indicating that he didn't expect any compensation, and Olivia clarified, "You messed up, Dad? And why couldn't you go to the police? If these bandits damaged the car, especially someone else's, and tried to intimidate you, then they should be held accountable. There must be some way to deal with them. I think you absolutely must file a report. Of course, an investigation on the hot trail won't work anymore, but you have to fight this lawlessness somehow." Oh, Liv, how naive you still are. Sophie said that their local police station is bought off completely. If you go there, you could lose your health, or even your life, without trial or investigation. But aren't there supervisory bodies above the police? The prosecutor's office or something like an internal affairs department? It's better not to go there either. It's like wading into water without knowing the ford. Anyway, for a good result, you need to have a direct contact with someone from the staff. Then the case won't stall. When Sophie's friend returns, then we can try. For now, we just have to lie low quietly. So that's how things are, Livy. In my old age, I've ended up in such a mess that I wouldn't wish it on an enemy. Thank goodness your husband and his mother were merciful to Sophie and me. Otherwise, I'd probably be rotting somewhere buried like a dog by now. Olivia saw a tired man before her, not at all a happy lover. Her resentment for her mother somehow faded into the background. She didn't want to make sarcastic remarks or comment on the boomerang that had returned. After all, this man with anxiety in his eyes remained her dad. The same one who taught her to ride a bicycle, supported her in difficult situations, and explained math and physics problems. She remembered how he supported her decision at 18 to marry Arthur. Her mother had insisted she shouldn't rush, but her father reminded her that they, in fact, had also gotten married barely a week after their high school graduation party. Arthur, sensing that Olivia's mood had softened, decided not to push his luck any further and slyly asked his father-in-law, "Mr. Miller, maybe we should have a bite. Let's at least have some tea with sandwiches." The man was embarrassed, realizing that he was essentially treating his daughter and son-in-law with their own money, and added, "Remember, Livy, what your grandmother used to say, using your own lard to grease your own snout?" For the first time on this difficult day, the woman smiled genuinely. "Yes, and I always used to ask her what a snout was. Grandma patiently explained it to me every time, as if it were the first. It was like a ceremony for us." "Dad, I'm sorry, but I really don't feel like eating. Too much news for today, and tomorrow is a work day." I need to get a good rest before it. And before that, I need to have a serious talk with Arthur about secrets in family life. Although, judging by Olivia's tone, the main emotional storm had passed. Arthur put his arm around his wife's shoulders and lowered his head guiltily. Mr. Miller began thanking his son-in-law again, not forgetting to put in a good word for him. "Thank you for everything. Go on, get some rest. Just, daughter, don't be angry with your husband and don't scold him. He's a gem. If anyone is to blame, it's me." Olivia left her favorite armchair and froze, not knowing how to act next. Should she hug and kiss her dad, reconciling with him after long years of estrangement? Or just say goodbye? Each option seemed inappropriate. Sophia diffused the situation. She appeared with a basket of berries. "I picked these for you and Barbara. As far as I know, she should be back from the sanatorium soon. We'll manage to figure out where to move by then so as not to cause inconvenience." At the words of her father's young mistress, anger stirred in Olivia's soul again. How cleverly you dispose of other people's property and don't deny yourself anything. Of course, Arthur put his arm around his wife's waist and gently but persistently pulled her towards the exit to prevent another argument. Olivia felt terribly tired, both from following him and from the news that had fallen upon her. Mr. Miller went to see his daughter and son-in-law off to their car. He gestured for Sophie to stay in the house so as not to provoke another outburst of hatred. On the way home, Olivia tried not to express her irritation at the situation that had developed in her life. Her husband was faithful, and she mentally praised herself for not sharing her suspicions with her mother. However, how to react to her father's partial return was completely unclear. She feared that her father's concern for her and Sophia was somehow insincere. Sophia had brought the berries, as if she had picked them from her own dasha, generously scattering other people's property. At home, Arthur tried to anticipate his wife's every wish to improve her mood. After dinner, he finally decided to apologize. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Mr. Miller right away. I was afraid you'd be angry." "You were right to be afraid. For me, Dad's action back then was the end of my childhood. You know, I thought for a long time that I wouldn't even talk to him, even if he begged for a meeting. But then I ran into him, and I felt sorry for him. Oh, I'm afraid this Sophie definitely doesn't have pure intentions living with my father in a house with partial amenities." Arthur tried to defend his father-in-law's new paramour. "Liv, you yourself understand that judging a person by the first impression isn't entirely fair. Sophia seemed to treat Mr. Miller with great tenderness. She cooks food and keeps the dasha tidy. And anyway, my dear, I think you're being too critical of her. She had a very difficult past, but she didn't become embittered. Can you imagine? At 18, she had an elderly grandmother, a younger sister, and a little brother to care for. Despite all this, Sophie managed to get an education herself, a vocational one, but in a sought-after profession. I'm absolutely not interested in the biography of this schemer. Arthur, have you fallen under her influence too? How predictable you men are. A cunning woman pulls the wool over your eyes, and you're ready to defend her and ruin families because of her. Liv, you just didn't see the tenderness with which she cares for Mr. Miller. It's impossible to fake. And how she defended him during the attack. But you didn't see that, Olivia reasonably countered. Fear has big eyes, and it's quite possible that the incident was actually completely different. The woman was angry and didn't want to develop the topic of her father and his girlfriend's relationship at all. So she concluded, "Okay, maybe it's none of my business. I'll just tell you one thing. It would probably be reasonable for my dad and this girlfriend of his to rent a dacha in this same area. Remember, there were a few options?" Arthur supported his wife's idea. "Of course you're right. My mother is already used to being alone everywhere, both in the city apartment and at the dacha. She won't like it if someone else is managing her territory at the same time as her. I'll post an ad in the dacha chat now saying we'll rent a dacha at least for the rest of the season. I'll be driving Mom anyway, and this way I can also drop in on Mr. Miller. Well, and then, as your dad said, this neighbor's influential friend will return, and maybe the whole situation will be resolved peacefully. Actually, we have bank accounts, and we could withdraw money and help Mr. Miller out. Are you completely out of your mind? Dad betrayed Mom and me. You haven't experienced 100th of the emotional suffering we have. And now I'm supposed to give him my and your savings? And lose interest too? They'll get nothing from me and you. Okay, honey, calm down. I understand. We won't touch the accounts. When talking to and meeting her mother, Olivia was afraid of letting slip that she knew where her father was. And Barbara also kept Mr. Miller's secret. They couldn't find a well-equipped dacha to rent, but Arthur was offered a neglected plot almost at the edge of the area for practically free, just for the cost of water and electricity. The location would have been terrible for people who went to the dacha for the harvest, but for forced fugitives, it was hard to imagine a better option. Mr. Miller and Sophia, gathering their few belongings, moved to the new place. Arthur continued to provide them with everything they needed, and soon this began to greatly irritate Olivia. Firstly, the funds were taken from the family budget with her silent consent. And secondly, and most importantly, the woman felt disgusted protecting her father and his mistress. Olivia felt that by doing so, she was betraying her own mother. Keeping the secret was becoming increasingly difficult, especially since Barbara was planning to celebrate her anniversary at the dacha in early August. Because of this, Olivia was constantly nervous. This absolutely could not be allowed. A week before the holiday, the woman asked Arthur to take her to the dacha so she could have a serious talk with her father. She wanted to firmly explain that next weekend, he and this Sophie with the golden foot should stay in the house practically without leaving. Leaving her husband and mother-in-law, they headed towards the line of dacha plots. It was clear that many owners of these 600 square meters had long abandoned them, and it was almost impossible to drive down the street due to the sea buckthorn and lilac bushes that had felt freedom. But the rampant vegetation provided shade, which was such a relief in the abnormally hot August. Olivia walked slowly, rehearsing what and how she would say. Almost at the gate of the needed plot, the woman heard a hated voice. Olivia wanted to go in and tactlessly interrupt the stranger's conversation, but then some eighth sense made her stop. Her father's mistress's words were very unexpected. "No, Mark, I told you it's not working out yet. That annoying Olivia is ruining my whole plan. If it weren't for her, I would have gotten everything out of these fools by now. As it is, I have to live in someone else's dacha, go to the toilet outside, wash when the water in the tank heats up. The worst thing is I have to look devotedly into the eyes of this elderly idiot. At least because of this heat, his attraction to me disappears, and I don't have to go to bed with him. Although it's not even a bed here, it's sheer mockery. Ah, my dear Mark, you probably won't even recognize me after these few months. I haven't been to a spa, or gone to fitness, or even painted my nails. A complete scarecrow. But for this fool Pete, it'll do. I'll just convince him to sell his share of the apartment here, and then we'll get that property. Real estate prices here are almost like in the capital. With the money we got from the fake robbery, that will be enough for us to leave here and live normally somewhere on the coast." Sophia's intonation changed from irritated to whining, and it was clear how artistically cynical the woman was manipulating her interlocutor. However, this delight would have been much stronger if Sophia were an actress on stage. Now it was completely unclear when the father's paramour was lying. Olivia was almost not surprised by what she heard. She had suspected something like this. Fortunately, she had thought to turn on the recording on her phone. The sound wasn't perfect, but with effort, everything could be understood. By the end of the conversation, her father's mistress's speech was a continuous string of exclamations. She talked about how much she missed him. and Olivia became incredibly curious how Sophia would react now if she knew that there was incriminating evidence against her. Restraining herself, Olivia waited until her father's mistress finished her conversation, and only then came out of hiding. It was obvious to Olivia that Sophia was after money, but since it was difficult to prove it, she decided to act differently. So, she had to provoke the greedy Sophie and demonstrate the woman's true nature to her father, the woman because of whom he had destroyed a happy family. Deciding that she wouldn't hear anything new, Olivia cleared her throat and came out of the thicket. Sophia flinched, seeing her adversary. "Oh, hello, Livy. Come in, please. I made some soup here. I think it's tasty. Let me treat you for now, and then Dad will come." He went to the spring, thinking no one he knows would meet him there. Olivia didn't say everything she wanted to and clarified. "And how long has Dad been living with you?" "Not much of interest." Meeting her father on the forest path, Olivia asked, "Listen to me and try to believe. Sophie is just using you to get money. The attack on you both was staged, and here at the Dakas, she's hiding with you from imaginary danger. Here, listen to the recording I made." Mr. Miller listened to Sophia's recorded speech, and his face changed. Olivia felt sorry for him, but she didn't stop the recording. It was better to swallow the bitter pill at once. "Yes, daughter, modern technology has gone far. Admit it, you just somehow managed to synthesize Sophie's voice to make me quarrel with her." Olivia was disheartened. She realized that her father's feelings for the brazen, unscrupulous liar were deep. All attempts to tell or even provide visual evidence that the mistress intended to become the owner of elite real estate at the expense of others would be met with displeasure and even scandals. She had to somehow convince her father, open his eyes. "Dad, I beg you, don't rush to get money for her. She'll come up with something else to fleece you. So, I'll set up a test for her. I'll say that we've been brought money to pay off the debts, and you and Arthur will watch her to see how she acts. It would be good to have a few strong guys help us. I think that's doable." "Dad," Olivia replied, "let's go back to our place for now to discuss all the details." Without looking into his overgrown house, Mr. Miller headed towards his son-in-law's place, accompanied by his daughter. In the evening, the mistress again noticed that Mr. Miller was cold towards her, but didn't attach much importance to it, especially since this detachment suited her completely. Only when the man announced that his son-in-law had agreed to provide the money, but only in cash, did Sophia almost jump for joy. "My love, my sunshine. Now we can return to our usual way of life. Isn't it a miracle?" Arthur smiled. So far, everything was going exactly as they had planned. Thanks to one of his friends, he had managed to invite former Special Forces soldiers to participate in the arrest of the fraudsters. When Sophie's accomplices arrived at the Dasha, barely squeezing through the overgrown street, they were immediately apprehended by the brave guys. They treated Sophia very delicately, and Mr. Miller, coming very close, announced, "You, Sophie, despite your wise name, wanted to swindle me again. But you didn't realize you talked too much and in the wrong places. Fortunately, Olivia overheard your frank conversation. So if you don't want to end up in prison for fraud and drag these fools down with you, then pay me back what you stole from me with the help of your buddies." Sophia had no choice but to write a receipt. Immediately after that, a tired Mr. Miller asked Arthur to drive him to the city and hurried to his wife, buying a gorgeous bouquet of flowers on the way. "Veronica, it's as if a hidden current has passed through me. Let's try to start our relationship anew." Veronica smiled at her ex-husband, and he thought he had already found the key to her heart. But the woman suddenly announced, "Actually, I've already started a new love story, and you don't fit into it. So if you want honesty, know this. During the divorce, you took almost everything you brought into the marriage, and I didn't fight for a single thing. If they were important to you, you took them. And now you've suddenly realized you undersold yourself. you're left with nothing. Although you do have the amount N returned by Sophie.